Okay, we are beginning chapter 28. This chapter continues along the theme of how a person should respond, and as we might say, how do you feel about that when it comes to their distracting thoughts? So, in the excuse me, in the previous chapter, we talked about distracting thoughts during the pursuit of a person's what we call sort of derech eretz, their ordinary activities in the process of the world. And there, the Rebbe's basic strategy was, don't be sad, be glad. This is an opportunity to do a mitzvah, the mitzvah of dismissing distracting thoughts. And by doing that, a person is fulfilling a mitzvah. So, quote, what is there to be upset about? A person should be celebratory that he's got the chance to do this mitzvah. But what happens if these distracting thoughts are not in the middle of my workday, but they are disrupting my more overt service of Hashem, my davening and my learning Torah? So here we can't simply apply the response that, well, now you get to do the mitzvah of dispelling distracting thoughts because he's already doing a mitzvah. And the rule of thumb is that when a person is engaged in one mitzvah, that overrides the obligation to do any other mitzvah. So he can't see this as just an opportunity, like when he dismisses distracting thoughts during his routine life activities. So what's he supposed to do now? How is he supposed to handle it? Now, in short, as we will see, the Alter Rebbe will still go with the strategy, the pragmatic strategy of just ignore it, walk away from it. It's a bully, and bullies thrive on response, and the absence of any response is going to make you less vulnerable to the continuous attack. So that is still going to be the essential strategy that we're going to employ when it comes to these distracting thoughts. But it is going to be somewhat different because it is coming during my davening or my overt service of Hashem. And one of the great concerns is that the person is going to start interpreting that this distraction is evidence that my thoughts or my davening is flawed. Because if I was a good davener, I wouldn't be noticing whether it's some sort of trivial nonsense like I have to change the light bulb in the refrigerator, to something even potentially more damaging, like I'm so angry at this person and I'm so annoyed at that person, or whatever other issue that could really fall into the category of prohibited thoughts, not just distracting thoughts. So here we go. Chapter 28, Perek Chavches, and again, as we often do, we look at the first letter, and it's that letter Vav. The letter Vav, which we translate as and. In English, that's poor form to begin a sentence with and. But in Torah, as you'll note in the Chumash, for a prime example, a way disproportionate number of verses begin with the letter Vav, way more than any randomization of letters, because most of Torah is this continuous flow. So when we see the letter Vav to begin a chapter in Tanya, that is commonly evidence that we are continuing in the similar theme. And again, as we discussed, the theme that we're talking about is how to deal with distracting and disruptive thoughts. Vafilu im noiflim, even if they fall. And again, that's always a key phrase. Generally speaking, nothing good falls in our laps. Yes, we all love the story about the guy who was walking down the street and the wind blew and some miraculous benefit fell into his lap. Okay, amen. But for that, we don't need to have Tanya, which is about strategies and tactics for how we can overcome our impulses and our flaws. If we're looking for things to fall in our lap, then if something falls in our lap, it's not usually a sign of something positive. It could be, but again, I think here the Alter Rebbe is using it very deliberately. It's like parachuting in. I'm trying to daven, I'm trying to learn Torah, and boom, this is coming in from some foreign place. And it is, and this is the key word, hirhure. Now, we have discussed this at great length in numerous contexts, but it's worth repeating just for a moment. The word for thought is machshava. Machshava is rooted in the word for chashuv, something that is significant. And hirhur is like the tickle of a thought. It's not even the fully developed thought. And in a certain sense, hirhurim are, I'm going to use the word involuntary. And I can't help that. It's like getting hungry on Yom Kippur. We've used that analogy before. I can't help that I get hungry on Yom Kippur. It's not a character flaw that I get hungry on Yom Kippur. Um, what is voluntary is if I allow that hirhur to become a fully developed and full-blown machshava. If I give it substance, stature, and significance. If I treat it just as a small tickle, then I can dismiss it. That's the opportunity that I am given. I can't control the hirhur, and this is essentially the difference between the Beinoni and the tzaddik. The tzaddik doesn't have the hirhur. It's like a language that he doesn't speak, and so he doesn't even notice it. Whereas if I hear a language that I may not speak, but I can potentially make out a few words, I am more distracted and attracted to it. So hirhur is not a failure. Machshava is a deliberate choice and thus a failure. So noiflim loy hirhure taivas. If it has come to him, this tickle of a taiva, and again, the key word here being noifel, they fall to the person. V'shar machshava zaris, and other strange thoughts. Now, when we say strange, it doesn't mean that it's evil. Sometimes we conflagrate that with the term avodah zara, where we're serving something that is foreign. We commonly translate the phrase avodah zara to mean idolatry, but it means the service of something strange. That's the word zar or zaros here in the plural. So machshava zaros are not necessarily evil thoughts of cheating or lying or whatever it is. They are rather thoughts that are not appropriate for this moment, like changing the light bulb. It's not an evil thought, and it's even an appropriate thought. It's just not an appropriate thought while I'm studying Torah or davening or doing mitzvahs or whatever it might be. So it's not that it's evil, unlike in the previous chapter where we talked about the person who was at his job and he starts thinking about how he could lie, cheat, and steal, which are evil thoughts. Here, the person is davening or learning Torah, and he's having distracting thoughts. And that's really the key phrase. B'shas ha'avoda, b'Torah or b'tefillah, b'kavana. When he is in the moment of his service of Hashem, and he is in the moment of studying Torah. So again, in the previous chapter, when the person had these distracting thoughts while he was busy at his job or whatever it was, we simply said to him, oh, whoopee, now you can do the mitzvah of pushing away distracting thoughts. But since this person is already doing a mitzvah, they're already davening, they're already learning Torah, so we can't say, oh, now you have a chance to do a mitzvah. I was in the middle of doing a mitzvah. I didn't need another mitzvah opportunity right now. I was doing the mitzvah of davening or doing the mitzvah of Torah study. So I can't use that strategy to be excited about the opportunity to dispel a distracting thought as a mitzvah because I'm already engaged in doing a mitzvah, and that's why it's particularly disheartening. Because here I am trying to use a few minutes to be in a moment of kedusha, and these distracting thoughts present themselves as a referendum of the failure of my kedusha, as if I'm never going to get this thing right anyway. As if it's to say that all of my avodas Hashem is basically worthless because I can't even sit and concentrate on my davening for a few minutes without starting to think about everything else. So the person, again, not only is being disrupted in the moment, the fear is that this leads to the perception of a complete invalidation of my entire existence and my entire service of Hashem. A little bit of that common phrase, perfect is the enemy of the good. It's not exactly the same thing, because the person's disappointment in self in this moment is not that he's not perfect. It's that I can't even daven. I can't even do anything right without being distracted. So who am I? I'm really just a person consumed with trivialities and not able to focus on my davening. So this is where the nefariousness of this distracting thought goes beyond just that one moment that I interrupt my davening to start thinking about some triviality. It starts to potentially undermine the entirety of my perception of my Torah and my and mitzvahs. So what's the Alter Rebbe's first response? Al yoshis leiv alehen, ela yasiach daita mihen kerega. So the Alter Rebbe says, do not turn your heart to it and dismiss it from your thoughts. So the question is, what is the Alter Rebbe referring to by using these two phrases, the heart and the thoughts? Now, we are familiar, essentially, the whole message of Chabad is exactly the tension that exists, that is present between the intellect, which again is not just about how many volumes of the Talmud I've mastered, but it's about my capacity to engage my mind, to have an understanding that is way outside of my personal self-absorption. That is, my mind is my escape hatch from the from the mundane and from what's attracting and distracting me at this very moment. And my heart, again, is the home field, the seat of the seat of impulse, and therefore the home field of the animated animal soul that responds to stimulation. I see it, I want it, I get all excited about it. And here is where the Alter Rebbe is using both. Why? Because the heart is not where the Beinoni really excels. A reminder, the general concept is that the Beinoni's heart is much more, is like, almost identical, possibly, to the Russia. His animal soul is as raging as it was the day it was created. It has not slowed down at all. It is just as gung-ho and chaotic as it's ever been. So the Beinoni is never going to really master his heart, his emotions, his reaction. Let's use that word. His reaction to stimulus. So he should not turn his heart to it. How? By removing it from his mind. That's where the Beinoni is strong. There's an old saying: "Don't bring a knife to a gunfight." Meaning, you Beinoni, you're not likely to win the battle of the heart. Your strength, your capacity is in the moyach. And the moyach is going to bring the heart around to its side of seeing things. That's where the Beinoni is equipped. That's where the Beinoni is strong in the intellect. So don't give your heart to it, because you're not likely to win that battle. Instead, where you are powerful, where you are strong, is in what you're going to concentrate on. And that concentration is the moyach, and that's where the Beinoni shines. So turn your moyach away from it as a consequence. And do it, and here's the phrase, kerega, immediately. Now, you may recall that the Alter Rebbe earlier used not the same term, but a similar idea when he talked about the quote from King Solomon that compared the dominance of wisdom over foolishness to the dominance of light over dark. And there, the Alter Rebbe's strategy was that just like when you turn the light on, the darkness goes away without further effort. It effortlessly pushes away the dark, and it can never be so dark as to squash the light. A single candle pushes away a lot of darkness. You're familiar with this phrase, I hope. So too, here the Alter Rebbe is saying a similar idea, that as soon as we engage the intellect to say, I am not thinking about that. I'm not thinking about changing the oil in the car, whatever nonsense it is. I am not allowing that hirhur, that tickle, to blossom, I guess is the word, into a full-blown machshava, thought. Immediately, if I do it immediately, it goes away. And again, right back to the analogy of the bully. So if the bully is bullying, and the person ignores them, but eventually says, stop, That slightest attention, that smallest amount of response empowers the bully to keep bullying. Well, in a similar fashion, we have to immediately, and that's the key word here, kirega, in that immediate moment, dismiss it. Dismiss it. Now, one might think, why am I dismissing it? Maybe I should see this as an opportunity. There is a common truth, and it's got a truth to it, and it exists in Torah, and it exists, lahavdil, in the secular world of what we loosely call psychology. There is a concept that a person's greatest weakness is really their greatest strength, and that a person who is very lustful can actually transform that and become very generous. And a person who's very rigid and stingy can become very organized and disciplined. And we can sweeten the midah, as we refer to it. That is, I take my weakness, I dig down deep to find what is its core sphera, what is its core character trait. And rather than have it manifest in the negativity of lust or greed, which is a distorted form of chesed, or harshness and rigidity and stinginess, which is a distorted form of gevura, I can redirect the very powerful midah of chesed to being generous and kind, and redirect the distorted form of my midah of gevura to being very disciplined, to being very punctual and very reliable. And in this manner, I have transformed an enemy into a friend. That is a concept that does exist. It certainly exists in Torah, and I think it even exists in a secular idea. So therefore, one might think, let's apply that same objective here. So what am I thinking about while I'm in the middle of davening? Whatever fill in the blank silliness, or even, God forbid, worse than silliness. If I'm thinking about something that's actually inappropriate, that's actually a violation, that's actually sinful, I'm not just thinking about changing the light bulb, but I'm thinking about how I could lie, cheat, and steal. Let me take a moment and think deeply within myself. Why is this coming across in this manner? And there are stories about the great tzaddikim who people came to them with some sort of bizarre circumstance, hoping that the tzaddik could give them some insight as to how they could correct themselves. And the tzaddik would have to look within himself, and at some real stretch of the imagination analogy, he would find where he too had struggled with this same distraction, even though it was 10 steps removed analogy. And this way, he was able to help the person. So why don't I do that too? So the Alter Rebbe says, Aliyah shoita. Do not be such a fool. Now, that's a pretty harsh word, shoita. To don't be so foolish. And we'll talk about why perhaps or what we could learn, at least, from the Alter Rebbe's usage of this pretty harsh term. Don't be such a fool to la'asik, to engage. And that's another real important word, because the word asik means to be fully embedded and engaged in it, mind, heart, intellect, passion, enthusiasm. B'halas hamidos, in trying to rescue the midah that has been distorted by this distracting thought, where the person again says, well, I'm thinking about harsh and rigidity and self-servingness. Let me dig deep down and find that to be gevura and then redirect it. Don't do that. Don't do that. Shal hamachshava zara kanoida. That of this machshava zara, as is established. Again, it is established that there is such a character trait. It's not a falseness. It is indeed. And yet, Tanya, as we try to remember, is not an academic text. It's a strategy and tactic text. So it's telling you what is pragmatic. And very much the message to the Beinoni is a message of pragmatism. Because remember, the Beinoni is not likely to ever become the tzaddik. We are not teaching him how to cure his problem. We're teaching him how to deal with his problem. And once we understand that, we become fixated on dealing with it. So if we take the most extreme of circumstances, if a person is trying to overcome some negative character trait, and we teach them how to do it, and we walk them through it, we would not deliberately drop him in the middle of such a difficult circumstance, such a taiva circumstance, to test out his skills. We say every morning in the davening, do not bring me to a test. Don't go looking for it. Life itself will present you with enough challenges. You don't got to make up new ones. You don't have to create new challenges in the hopes of testing your strength. Life itself will bring it to you. It's like life insurance. You pay for it, you never hope to use it. So the Alter Rebbe says, do not be a fool to engage in this. Why? Because that practice is for the tzaddik. Why is that practice for the tzaddik? Because he's better at it than I am? Not just because the tzaddik is better, but rather because they, the tzaddik, don't have these machshavas zaros. They just get other people's machshavas zaros, and therefore they can do the analysis. The old saying that any lawyer who represents himself in court has a fool for a client. He's got to find somebody outside of the emotional entanglement to find a level of joy or happiness within his life experience. So the tzaddik that the person comes to and says, help me, I had this problem, and the tzaddik can then look within his own life, or look within this person's life. Why? Because it has not come upon him. And again, as we have talked about in numerous circumstances, there is a distinctive circumstance, a distinctive significance, value, superiority, come up with some better word, for deliberate strategization, I can't pronounce the word, strategizing versus that which is, oh, by the way. It's a little bit like we talked about in the Parsha yesterday, the difference between Vayikar without the Aleph at the end and Vayikra with the Aleph at the end. Vayikar means, oh, by the way, it happened. It was oh, by the way. And things that are, oh, by the way, it's commonly a surefire sign of being a little bit taken advantage of. Don't worry about it. It's a little bit. And Vayikra with an Aleph at the end is much more about the deliberation and the particularism of getting the job done, the specificity of how and the particularism of the accomplishment. And that's really the significance that we're shooting for, that a person should not try and deal with it when they get attacked. They should rather sit down and strategize as to how they're going to deal with this when it should happen in the future. So the Beinoni, that noiflim loy, it fell into his lap. That's a sign that he's not really equipped to deal with it. What should he do? Push it away with both hands. Don't engage. Isn't there a truism, which there is, that there can be a profit to be found within this distracted thought, as utilizing it as a looking glass into the core of my identity. And what is it that I can find buried within myself that is having this distorted form of expression, which I need to address? Yes, but don't try this at home. Not just because you're not good enough at it. It's not just an insult. And it's not just a strategy or a pragmatism like don't bother with it. It's saying the fact that it fell to you means that it's your issue and you can't untangle yourself. This is meant for tzaddikim, that is the person who is themselves immune to this character trait. Now, again, if we just think about this in a very personal life experience, if I come to somebody and I say, can you help me? This is the distracting thought. And they start saying about how they do it. And then they get, well, then it's about them and it's not about me. It's not going to necessarily be so helpful. If they say, well, I've had this experience and this is what I have done and I have found, okay, now it's helpful. But if they start making it about them, then it's not going to be so helpful. And it's a very difficult, blurry line between them. And so this is what the Alter Rebbe is recommending. Don't think about it. Again, the counter argument goes, wait, I got an argument. And again, what this is doing is it's keeping me from davening. Because in the middle of davening, I'm having this back and forth and this argument, and it's not helpful. So the Alter Rebbe says, if it falls to me from my own, that is, it's not somebody else's. It's not that I am detached and can, at an arm's distance, help this person, myself, address this issue, but rather, it comes from me. That means it lives within me. If it lives within me, I'm not equipped to deal with it, and certainly not now while I'm trying to daven. Certainly not now while I'm in the midst of my service of Hashem. So yes, there is a value, which we will discuss, that the person will go separately and he'll sit with an outside party who's not entangled in all of this. I'll use the term mishigas, and I use that term probably inappropriately because it could be a real serious thing. It could be not just about changing light bulbs, but about real serious distraction. And then the two of them can come up with a strategy. But again, the fact that it blindsides me in the middle of my davening is proof number one that it's not a godly thing. How do I know? Because it's coming from within me. It's coming from the left side of my heart. So the Alter Rebbe asks a sort of straightforward question that is itself sort of unanswerable. If I'm tethered down here to this distracting thought, and I'm trying to get out of it, well, how can I hope to get above when I'm tethered down here below? I'm kind of stuck here. How do I think I'm getting out of this? It doesn't seem like I have any capacity to do that. However, and you see here, there's a two dots, like a colon, if you have in the Hebrew type, which suggests like a real hard break. And then the word ach, which also suggests, it means however, or new idea, or something like that. So what is being approached now is a whole nother pathway to how we're going to address this. Now, one of the issues here is not just that in this moment I happen to be distracted by some distraction, but something even more profound. I start to question my whole identity. What am I doing here? Do I really have any value in my service of Hashem? Or am I just fooling myself? Because here I am, I'm trying to sit and daven, and my davening is just being bombarded by all kinds of distracting thoughts. So who am I kidding here? Am I really doing anything? Am I really accomplishing anything of stature? Is my davening really worth anything? I can't even get a few words out without being distracted. But that, the Alter Rebbe tells us, is not true. And it's part of the trick of the Yetzer Hara. So, it's the old story. Sometimes I should feel guilty. Sometimes it could be true. I've told this story before about the Rav who from Kfar Chabad who came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, "Oh, it's the Rav from Kfar Chabad." And the Rav said in a self-deprecating tone, "Kfar Chabad could have a better Rav." And the Rebbe said, "So be better." Don't just say, "Oh, I'm such a terrible person." So do something about it. On the other hand, never allow your failings to discredit or devalue your virtues. Don't allow one to negate the other. There has to be an awareness of my virtue and not allow my distractions to be evidence that I'm a failure. Okay, so this sounds like a nice thing to say and makes you feel better, and you're really a nice person, and maybe we're even fishing for half a compliment over here. and so on. But why is this the case? So the Alter Rebbe doesn't just sort of pat you on the back, the old, I'm scared. Don't be scared. Okay, no, I'm not scared. It's not just about some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, placating term. The Alter Rebbe explains why, I'll use this term, I don't know if it's the right term, mathematically, this is not a sign of failure. Afal PK, nevertheless, al yipo liboy bikirbo. Do not let your heart sink. That, my heart's in my stomach feeling. Don't let this disappoint you. Liyos mizeh eitzev, that a person should be eitzev. Now, we've run into this word before, eitzev, and it's a surefire sign that it's not a good thing. Eitzev, they translate it commonly, I think, as depression. But I know we today have a different understanding of the term depression. It's biochemical and so forth. So I like the word despondence. It's like, forget it. What's the point? I'm never going to be successful anyway. I give up. That whole kind of attitude that we're trying to overcome. So don't be despondent, nivoza, and disgusted with myself. B'shas ha'avoda, while I am serving Hashem. Why not? Just because it's a bummer to be around? I'm scared. Don't be scared. Okay, then I'm not scared. Or don't be scared. It's not fun to be around you when you're scared. Or don't be sad. It's not fun. Why not? Maybe I have perfectly legitimate reason to be scared. Why is it that we are assuming that this person has I'll use the word, the right to not be afraid? Maybe he's got a perfectly legitimate reason to be terrified of what's going on and disgusted with himself. Again, this isn't some Pollyanna sense of, I'm okay, you're okay, nobody's perfect. And it doesn't seem to match with the whole objective of Beinoni. So the Alter Rebbe, again, I use the word mathematically, it's probably a better word, is going to explain why, in fact, it's not just making him feel better, but why, in fact, Taka. So the Alter Rebbe says, first of all, first of all, you have to be b'simcha. So the old story, you don't cry at weddings and laugh at funerals. I don't just show up, but I'm very upset. Yeah, but now we're at a wedding. Now it's time to be joyous. And the fact that you're upset about your team lost the baseball game is not appropriate for you to bring that black cloud into this environment. So I'm in the middle of serving Hashem, and I have to do that with simcha. And my own problems notwithstanding, I have to gin up my simcha so that my problems will not cloud the experience. So that's one, so to speak, you got to be professional about it. And you have to be besimcha. But it's even more than that. Ella adarab, on the contrary. Yischazek v'yoyser v'yosef oimes b'chol koichoy b'kavanas hatfila b'chedva v'simcha yisera. He has to now use this as motivation. Now, I don't know, this might be a little bit more of a male thing than a female thing that he's going to respond to. You can't do it. You're worthless. Oh, yeah, I'll show you kind of response that he digs deeper within himself as a form of almost, I don't know, the word anger comes to mind, but that's not the word I'm looking for, but a sort of passion that he's going to be pushing back against his Yetzer Hara and his animal soul. He's going to drive it up to this sense that he's going to respond with the exact opposite of the intent of the distraction. So he's firing back with greater and greater intensity. When he takes the heart, so here is, in fact, the key. You recall the story of Rivka Imenu, who leaves the bad people, her brother Lavan and her father Besuel. They're bad people. So bad that God kills Besuel. And we begin the whole story of our historical suffering from Lavan. And she leaves those people, and she comes to marry Yitzchak and live in the house of Avram and Sarah, and she finally becomes pregnant. And then she's walking past the Avodah Zarah, the idolatry, and she feels a rumbling within herself. And she thinks, what happened here? I'm a failure. Here I thought I was with bad people, So I'm surrounded by bad people doing bad things. Understandably, that's my upbringing, but I'm going to do the battle and I'm going to get away from that. And I'm going to marry Yitzchak, even if they don't want me to. I'm going defiantly, and I'm going to live in a holy, righteous place with Abraham and be a holy and righteous person. And yet, here I am walking past idolatry, that which I thought I had completely uprooted from my very being. And instead of feeling disgust or indifference, that old rumbling is coming all back again. Lama zel noichi. Why, if I put in all of this effort, it's all worthless, it's all meaningless. I am a failure. I can't even walk past idolatry without getting a hiror, without getting a rumbling. So what does she do? She goes to inquire of Hashem. She says, Hashem, what's going on here? I give up. I'm worthless. There's no point in my efforts. Look at all I've been through, and still I'm struggling. This is evidence, she says, that my avodas Hashem, my service of Hashem, is worthless. Because if it wasn't worthless, I wouldn't be distracted and even a tickle of awareness of idolatry. And Hashem responds to her, no, 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 you misunderstand. There are two nations that live within you. There is the godly soul, Yaakov, and the self-serving animating soul, Esav. And they are destined to forever be locked in battle. And when one rises, the other falls, but he only falls. He doesn't go away. He doesn't go away. But that's not how Abraham is. That's not how Yitzchak is. Right. They have a different life journey than you have. They have the characteristic of tzaddik ben tzaddik, and you have the virtue of Baal Tshuva. And again, we don't have to go through the whole story of Yitzchak and Rivka, but we see that she's able to see a quality within Yaakov that he doesn't even see within himself, that becomes Yisroel, etc., etc. So here, taking this story back to us. So here I am, I sit down to daven, or to study Torah, or to do some other overtly godly behavior. And right away, I'm noticing this distraction, that distraction. So I start to interpret this as I'm a failure. I can't even spend a solid whatever time period exclusively and fully engaged in holiness without my mind wandering to some nonsense or some worse than nonsense. So this I interpret to not only be annoying, but it must be evidence that I am a failed spiritual creature. My spirituality is worthless because look at me. I can't even get a few words of davening out of my mouth without being distracted. So this would be true if I was only one entity. But there's two entities. There's the godly and the self-serving. And this idea that I thought that now that I left the bad people, and now that I've committed myself, or as the saying goes, now that I'm frum, why isn't everything or anything perfect? How come I'm still struggling? And Hashem's response is that there are two nations within you. This is essentially what it's going to be. Well, that doesn't sound very nice. Well, it does get a little easier, but that's what life is about constantly being engaged in the struggle. And we get frustrated, like, why am I still working? It's so hard. I'll share with you just one brief story. Made a big impression on me when I was about 14 or 15. I overheard these two guys were talking in shul, not during the davening. And this guy was saying, oh, I know this guy, and he sold his business for $20 million, and he plays golf all day. And they're like, oh, wow, and I'm like, oh, wow, And there was a man, he's already passed, he sat at my father's, who's living in Bewell's, table in shul. He was a judge. He was a very wise man. He had like a certain wisdom about him. And he overhears this conversation. He chimes in. He says, he should have sold his business for $30 million. He could have hired someone to play golf for him all day. Now, I don't know exactly what he meant, but clear as day, I remember this story. And what it meant to me is that's not a life to play golf all day. Because if it was, hire someone to play golf for you. Right. We're not looking to hire someone to play golf. We're looking to be engaged. Don't view life as a nuisance to be shaken off, and so on. So this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying, back into the point at hand. He's not just patting you on the head and saying, well, this is the best you can do. Now get out of here, kid. You bother me. The Alter Rebbe is saying, this is not this distracting. When I say this, I mean the distracting thoughts are not a signal that you have somehow failed in your service of Hashem. Because they're coming from the left side of the heart that is dedicated and designated to battle with you, and that's what it's doing. Again, tragically, war is on our minds, and God forbid, but there are setbacks in war. So when we have a setback, there is a certain sentiment that says, forget it, pull out, go back. In other words, like, just what do I got to do when no one will bother me? Well, they're not stopping because you pull out. That's only going to embolden them further. Well, let's just go back to the way it was. Well, no, they're trying to kill you. No, they're not. Yes, they are. They want to kill you. The Nefesh HaBahamis wants to consume your identity. It's not taking a day off. And if you recoil and think that I'm going to surrender and compromise, you can't make a deal with cockroaches or fire or disease. You can't say, well, I'll let there be a few cockroaches. I'll put out most of the fire. I'll get rid of most of the sickness, and I'll make a deal with it. You can't make a deal with it. You've got to be engaged. And it's exhausting and it's wearing, but that's what life is about. It's about being engaged, not about what do I got to do so I can sit on the couch and eat popcorn. And therefore, I'm sorry, V'noiden, we know as a rule, derech hanechomim, what is the way of battlers, v'chein hanevokim, and also those who are dusting it up. Now, what's the difference between battlers and literally we would translate it as dusters, but it's a reference, amongst many things, to the battle between Yaakov and Esav. We're all familiar with the story that the night before their confrontation, Yaakov meets the man, right, who we identify as the angel of Esav, but it doesn't say that in the Chumash, and they dust all night. They dust it up. They have a dust up. I think we even use that term in English. The difference there is you might think, well, that's not as intense as battling. And the root of the word nilchamim, milchama, is the word lechem, bread. Because, again, we never know from it, but that's what it is. It's a battle for basic survival. And when it comes to basic survival, as we know, the human body can endure all kinds of strain to keep its body going because it is battling for its very existence. And even when it's just a dust up, it doesn't seem to be so intense. Excuse me. It doesn't seem, pardon me, it doesn't seem to be so intense. What is the key? The key is when one exerts strength, that evokes a strength from the enemy. So plug it back into our story. Therefore, so now my nefesh elokis asserts itself. And it puts forward this great effort. And I'm going to sit and daven. I'm going to sit and study Torah. I'm going to do godly things. What happens? The other guy doesn't go away. He gets his gumption up just as well to match his intensity. So there is an old saying, do a job poorly enough and they'll never ask you to do it again. And we've probably all encountered that person, maybe even seen it within ourselves, where let me put what's the least amount of effort I could put in. Don't volunteer. Don't stick your neck out. I'll just sit here on the side. That's okay. That's okay. Go ahead without me. Why? Because I know that once I put in an effort, boom, my Nefesh HaBahamis is coming with a counter effort that's going to attempt to squash my effort. The Alter Rebbe says, don't be that guy. Don't look to hide. We got to step up. You know, the Rebbe's very strong message is, take the Lubavitch commercial here. The Rebbe's very strong effort. If you know Aleph Beis, teach Aleph. Well, I'm not a rabbi. Doesn't matter. All hands on deck. It's like the old bucket lines for the fires. Well, you go ahead without me. What do you mean? We're not asking you to do you a favor. Get in line. Everybody has to be in line. But I'm not so good at it. I don't know how. But there's always a good excuse why I'm not the right guy. But here, this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. When I exert my nefesh elokis, expect your nefesh habahamis to exert itself right back. Expect it to come roaring right back. And again, there is that saying that what is my particular avodah, that which is most difficult for me. That's where my nefesh habahamis gets sensitive. That's where it gets crazy. It's not going to tell me to eat pizza at Kol Nidre because he knows I'm not going to do it. But when I really exert my nefesh elokis, my nefesh habahamis is going to try to match it with that intensity. So here the Alter Rebbe says another level. Hey, this is a compliment. I got noticed. My nefesh habahamis noticed me to the point that it stepped up its game in my opposition. To just confuse you. And that's the key word. Even if I say, will you stop it? You go away. Will you stop bothering me? I hate you. He's won. He's won. Because I've taken those moments away from davening. That rather than saying the davening, I'm saying, go away. I don't like you. He's won. Like the bully. The slightest flinch gets it. I've shared this before. I wish I would have saved it. There was an old comic strip 100 years ago. This mother is pushing two kids in the shopping cart through the grocery store. One kid says, can I have candy? No. Next panel, same scene. Can I have candy? No. Can I have candy? No. Can I have candy? I'll think about it. Can I have candy? And his brother says, quiet. She said yes already. That's it. Once you have flinched, you have already given succor to the nefesh habahamis. So don't even pay attention. Just bear down that much more. It'll make him want to go away because he sees every time he tickles you about the light bulb, you become a more intense davener. So I'm going to condition the nefesh habahamis to leave me alone. And what's our objective? It's to treat it, not to defeat it, because we're not tzaddik. We're Beinoni. And the Beinoni treats, he doesn't defeat. So the Alter Rebbe continues. Lapila, and to try to drag you down machshava zara shalom with its machshava zaris. So again, what's the concern here? The concern is twofold. A, this is really annoying. And B, the sort of more overarching concern, I'm a failure. I can't daven, this means I'm a failure. And this is where the Alter Rebbe comes in with what I called before the math, the engineering, not just try to make you feel better, but the sincere. And therefore he says, V'loi ketoyas ha'olam, not like the mistake that people make. And again, it's essentially the mistake, I know that's a harsh word to use, that Rivka Imenu made. She made the mistake of thinking that her distraction by Avodah Zarah is evidence of her failure. V'loi ketoyas ha'olam, it's not like the mistake. Shetoyim, that they make the mistake, lo yichiach, to bring proof positive, minefilas hamachshava zara, from this falling, again, this uncontrolled falling of a distracting thought, michlal, from whence I deduce, ipso facto, shein tefilosam klum, that my davening is worthless. Not just that it's annoying, but this means that I have failed. And again, in a sense, using that metaphor or analogy, Rivka Imenu says, well, what am I doing this for? I'm no good at this. I'm still distracted. I still notice. And the Alter Rebbe's message is that's not a sign of failure. It is, in a certain ironic way, a sign of success. And, we've heard that phrase, why did God choose the Jews? Choose someone else. It's too hard. Well, that's what Yom Kippur is about. Yom Kippur is you get a break. The Nefesh HaBahamis goes away. The Nefesh HaBahamis doesn't show up. You get a break because, look, we are only limited beings, and how can you expect us to maintain this intensity all day? It's like too much. Okay, Hashem says, I'll give you a break. And this is the mistake that the person says, that if I was davening properly, if I was a good person, I wouldn't have these thoughts. And again, as we often talk about, we may not be good people, but we do good things. And we're not interested as much as in good people, though we'd like that. We still have conflict, and I still might like to punch the guy in the nose, but I don't actually consider it, and I certainly don't do it. So what do I want? Nose punchers who are good people or non-nose punchers who are bad people? I'd rather have non-nose punchers that are bad people than nose punchers who are good people. Again, right, it's very pragmatic. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is dealing with. It's a pragmatism. We're here to treat, not defeat. That would be true if we just were a soul, Solesoul. I mean, if we just had one impulse within us, then that would be accurate. Then we would say, look, you win some, you lose some, you lost more, you can't even daven. That means you're a failure. If it was the same force that was davening as was thinking this distracting thought. But if we dig down deeper, each one of them is at battle with the other. There's two completely separate entities. And each one is battling. So again, I mean, tragically, the world is at war once again. So when there is, God forbid, chas v'shalom, a casualty, we don't say, well, that means that we have failed as a society. We failed as an army because we lost a soldier. It's a tragedy and we mourn it. I'm not dismissing it. But it's not an indication that the battle is wrong or that we are flawed. That is, in the objective and in the execution. And they're both battling in the intellect. And each one wants total and complete dominance. They're not going away. And again, if the Nefesh Elokis resigns, that doesn't mean the Nefesh HaBahamis is slowing down. He's just as greedy as ever. And you can't make a deal with him. Godly thoughts come from godly soul. And worldly, again, not necessarily bad, just things of this world, come from the animal soul. That's where they come from. And the godly soul is forced to intertwine with it. They're forced to be linked with each other, as we have talked about so many times. We don't have, like I like the word silos. And now my holiness, in shul I'm holy, at work I'll rip your face off, and I go back to shul, I go back to work. They're all intertwined with each other, and they need each other. For example, I'm sitting there and I'm davening. And this guy, who's an idolater and a wicked person, is sitting there, and he's deliberately trying to distract me. So again, the bully, if I say, he's won. Even if he leaves, that moment that I went, is already his victory. It's not what's the word? Negating his liability. It's not excusing his behavior. But I know that if I respond, that's only going to embolden him. It's not going to diminish him. And even if I punch him in the nose and he runs away, I have now been distracted with that moment of punching him in the nose. Then he's won anyway. Do not respond either way. Do not respond to his evil. Make yourself like stoneware. And do not listen. And now you're following the advice of Chazal. Like the statement reads, it's in Pirkei Avos, maybe it's in Mishlei, I forget already. Do not respond to a fool in his foolishness. Why? Pen to Shabala, you'll become just like him. Arguing with the fool makes you a fool. Gam atakach, so to you. Al yashem uma b'shum tainis umayna. Do not respond at any level. Don't counter-argue him. Generally speaking, with some exception, the Rebbe was opposed to debates. I think it was a more popular thing, like in the 70s and 80s. Everyone's having debates about Buddhism and this religion and that religion. First of all, nothing good comes from it. People just wind up getting personal, and they side with the one who's got nicer hair and a better accent, or wittier or funnier. And you may win the argument, but you lose a friend. I mean, they just get angry at you. It's just a mess. Don't do it. Don't do it. And it's the same thing here. Don't engage. When you engage, that's already a failure, because I've spent time engaging with this distraction rather than davening and then learning and so on. If I wrestle with the dirty, I will get dirty. Even when I win, I lose. Do not listen to it, completely dismiss it from your mind. Push it away physically, that is, don't listen to it. Push it away mentally. Do not give it any of your mental concentration. Because it will drag on you. It drags you down. There's no positive to it. It will drag you down. So what should you do? Turn to Hashem, like Rivka, who said, Hashem, help me out. Help me out here. Give me some strength to push this away. And that's the power. We have a rule, maybe this is really more for men than women, but the value of davening with the community, not only that you can do certain parts of the davening and the halachic side, but there's that sense that I'm not in this by myself. And again, remember the rule of thumb that my Nefesh HaBahamis has no joy in your Nefesh HaBahamis' indulgences. But my Nefesh HaLakis does have great passion for your Nefesh HaLakis. So when I partner with others, we got two Nefesh HaLakises, both committed to each other's benefit, and each Nefesh HaBahamis like, I don't care what you do. I don't want you to eat cookies. I want to eat cookies. He's not looking to enrich your Nefesh HaBahamis. So again, ask Hashem for what? L'rachim alav. Pashat rachmanis. Hashem, help me out here. Give me the strength to push away this negativity. Barachmav hamarubim, with your abundant rachmanis. Abundant meaning essentially limitless. Limitless rachmanis overpowers any and all. Limitless. Hashem, give me that limitless power. And don't let me think about this nonsense. It's hard. It's dangling in my eyes. Karachim aval banim, like a father would help out a son. I can't do it. Help me. And again, the analogy of father and son, it comes from the brain. Again, not about how many pages of Torah I know, but about my ability to see beyond it. This thing is staring me in the face. How am I going to live? Boom. I look above. I see the infinity of Hashem. The kochi yerachim Hashem al nafshay, and Hashem will in turn taka have rachmanis. And it will rescue you. It will rescue you. Hashem will channel that infinity to rescue you from these distracting waters. And again, water being a metaphor for indulgence, because all indulgences need water, because ultimately, even a Rolex, you need fruit to eat, because if you don't eat, all the Rolexes in the world are not going to be as dandy. V'lamana yasa, and do it for your sake, Hashem. Like Moshe Rabbeinu always says to Hashem, you can't destroy the Jews. It'll look bad on you. It'll look bad on you because you're associated with them. You're stuck, kind of, so to speak, Because the people are one with you. So do it for your sake, Hashem. Do the infinity for your sake. And in this manner, they will and you will be uplifted. So this thing is staring me in the face and all these distractions. The infinity of Hashem. It's that release. And it's going to pull, the more you look up, the more it's pulling you down. No, it's worse than you thought. No, it's more urgent. It can't wait 5 minutes. I just need a minute of your time. And this is what we're saying, Hashem, help me out. Pull me up from outside of this. All right, we'll stop here.